little intro. Okay. And hello, I think we are just about to enter. Hello, everybody. Welcome to PhD, Positivity Hack Delivered. Today, I'm joined myself, Beata Young, joined with Dr. Amina. Hello, Amina. Great
Hi,
to see
everyone.
you. Which part of the world are you at the moment?
I am in London, UK.
Great. Excellent. So you are also suffering lockdown, I presume?
Definitely.
Good. How are you coping with it?
I feel fine because I've been used to working from home and online for 4 years now.
Great. Well, Amina, apologies everybody for me moving around because I have to look after many devices just to make everything run smoothly. So, Dr. Amina, or Amina.
Amina, you can please call me Amina. You know me well.
We met over a year ago in London, and I remember exactly that time that I met you, because I remember the fact that when I came to this panel, we were listening to great speakers. They were talking about women on boards, and at one stage my blood was boiling a little bit, because I've heard this man who was supposedly pro-female mentioned the fact that women need to have ambition. And I waited a little bit, and but I couldn't wait any longer, and my fear of speaking up was not that much greater than my anger, because when he said women, it's much more difficult to reach a decision when you've got women on board, I thought, this is it, I've got to speak up. If nobody's delivering the truth, everybody will believe what he says. So that was my fear of speaking up. What about your fears? I'm sure you have some. I'm sure you're dealing with it on a daily basis, because actually last night I shared my story of my fear when I was a little girl, and somehow it resonated with many people, and many people thought that I am fearless. But I am not. Really deep down, I'm covering it with smile, and now I'm trying to not to shake too much in front of the camera, but we all have fears, and we all have ways to deal with it. So what is your way? What are your fears? And before we start, maybe if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm a transformational coach, and I help high achievers, professionals, a lot of doctors who are very service-driven, very capable and competent, but they might be feeling stuck in their life or in their career. And we work together to help them reclaim their power and their energy and their clarity. Some might call it confidence. And find the path that is right for them, so they can create the career and life that they really want, not the one that was designed for them or that they fell into. And I'm a doctor by background. I worked in hospitals, but I also worked on global health programs with the World Health Organization and the United Nations. So I have a wide range of experience, both at the front, including the front line, but also behind the lines, looking at policy and how we shape environments that are healthy for everyone. And it's in 2016 that I took a leap from that career into running my own business and setting up my own coaching and consulting practice.
So how was it for you? I mean, it was quite a big leap, right? From your monthly salary into something that is quite uncertain and, huge change.
Yeah, I think you named it there. The biggest change is the level of uncertainty. So fear of uncertainty was possibly the biggest fear or challenge that I faced, and getting used to not knowing when the next opportunity was going to come, when a new client would come, or when the impact would be created and therefore followed by the money. So fear of uncertainty, I would say, is the biggest challenge, but also the biggest opportunity for growth in an entrepreneurial journey, but also in a leadership journey.
So did you ever face the fact, and I think this is very much everybody's problem, every entrepreneur's problem, fear of other people will think. Is that a factor that really was going with your career all the time, or did you just do your, however you call it, epic shit or whatever you did in your life to achieve what you wanted? How did you cope?
Yeah, I think there are universal fears, and it's all relative. So to others, I looked like a very confident person, and to myself, I certainly had fear of visibility, for example, before giving a presentation or saying something that I really wanted to say, but I wasn't sure how it would be received. So I certainly had a fear of visibility, even though to other people it didn't look that way. And I'd say there are 7 big fears for anyone who wants to really fulfill their potential. That includes entrepreneurs, or if you're wanting to step into leadership and do more in your career, in your work, in your impact in the world. And those are a fear of uncertainty, because you don't know what's going to happen. You're stepping into the unknown. A fear of isolation, because you might be going against the grain. And if you're an entrepreneur, you might be working alone. If you're a leader, you certainly might be alone. There's fear of lack of structure, because if we're sticking with entrepreneurs, if you're just starting out, you're in startup mode, you're building a business, you don't know where to start. There is fear of lack of guidance, because you're having to make your own decisions. Fear of rejection, when you're making an offer or putting something out there in the world and people say no, and that's normal. Fear of failure. It's a big one. I don't think it needs explanation. And fear of visibility, because you're speaking a message that's hopefully authentic and true to you and maybe unique. And it's scary to be visible because you might be rejected by the tribe. And that creates anxiety.
So, but on the other hand, that fear makes us behave to be accepted by others. So we are self-validating what we are doing. So just to give you an example, and this is a raw story because I shared it last night, and Fran Moisa, who actually talked on our Positivity Hack Delivered almost 2 weeks ago, talked about fear of losing a job and how to deal with it. And her starting point was take a deep breath and not run away from that problem. And actually, when I was a child, I decided to run away from that problem. And it's okay to I believe it's okay to sometimes let yourself wait and wake up in the morning. Like, we discussed it with you, Amina, that great story of Gone with the Wind, when the main character says, when Clark Gable is leaving and she says, well, I'll think about it tomorrow. That's okay too. If you need that one day to rethink about the problem, because sometimes it turns out it wasn't that really huge of a problem. It turns out that, what seems to be huge stone is really going to be, in a year's time, is going to be small little stone on the beach of many stones, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's important to give yourself space. And so I would agree with you that we have to be human. We have to accept our humanity. We don't have to be human. We are human. And when we face a fear, we will experience a fear response, what's also known as fight, flight, freeze response. And it's important to be present with it rather than pretend it's not there or try and push through it, which will create more stress.
There are, though, some anxieties, and I'm not sure whether it's a case of practicing every day, or is there something that they should kind of have shock therapy? How would you approach these cases? What is your standard scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most people don't grow intentionally. A shock has to happen for people to sort of wake up and start thinking about what's important. And if you're one of those people who is interested in personal development and how to grow, well, you're one of the lucky ones, because it means whatever shock happens will be a bit less intense. And in coaching, it's what we call getting out of your comfort zone. And there's a nice diagram where there are 3 circles, or 3 concentric circles. The middle circle is the comfort zone, where you're not making yourself uncomfortable at all. You go about your routine, you live your nice life, and you hope it stays that way. There's the danger zone, where maybe you're fed up and you decide to do something completely different and just abandon everything, or do something really crazy. And then, there are consequences to that, and that you've probably gone a bit too far. So you want to be in the learning zone, between those two, where you're constantly taking little challenges. You're noticing where you have an idea, like, oh, it'd be nice if I could do that. And take note of that, because normally what happens after that is but maybe, not now, or I don't have enough time or money, or I don't have enough skills. So you'll get the inner critic kicking in. And so the growth is working through that with skill. And that's where a coach or a guide or a mentor can help you, so that the inner critic doesn't stop you. But it does, why we need some help is because it is uncomfortable, and it's easy to just give up and stay in the comfort zone.
So what would be the simple techniques? What would you advise if somebody was dealing with fear, and now I think everybody's left alone, staying at home and not really knowing how to address and how to reach out? We are bombarded with information. We have information overload, and how to deal with that? Do I switch off everything? Do I just go JOMO, joy of missing out? How to actually address that?
Yeah.
What is the simple technique you as a coach or from your career, what would you advise?
Yeah, that's great. JOMO is fantastic. So there's a tool I like, which comes from mindfulness. It's called the 4 R's. So whenever you feel or you realize that you're afraid of something, or you're stuck somehow, then go through the 4 R's. So R number 1 is to recognize that something's going on for you. Maybe you're afraid, maybe your fear of visibility is kicking in. Name what is happening. When you name it, it starts to lose its intensity. And if it's news, then if you recognize, then just spending too much time with the news or on the internet and I need to cut down, then great, you've recognized it. So that's step one. Step two is refrain. So you need to interrupt that negative pattern or the behavior that you really want to change. So refrain, just stop right there. Don't worry about what to do next, just stop. Third R is relax. So that comes back to your initial, the tip from your friend of breathing or doing whatever helps you relax. Maybe you need to go out. Maybe you can call a friend that makes you feel good. Maybe you can just get a cup of tea and look out of the window. Something that helps you relax. And breathing, of course, is the classic technique. And the fourth R, once you've grounded and you've relaxed a little, then you resolve. Then you might have an insight or an idea as to what to do next. But there's no point jumping into what to do next if you haven't gone through the previous steps, because you'll just do more of the same thing. So 4 R's.
Great. That works for me. I understand each step, even though I'm rather impatient. But so how did you deal with fear? Do you also face fear? I mean, of course, you faced fear when you started your entrepreneurial journey, but you as a coach should not really be that exposed to fear, are you?
I think that's a myth, Beata, that coaches have perfect lives and perfect minds. I don't believe in that, and that's not been my experience. I work with coaches. I've hired coaches and invested large sums of money in my coach, and I know he's not perfect, but he's ahead of me, and he's explored things in a deeper way than me, and so I can learn from him. So I would.
Is there a reason why you chose a male coach? Is there something that you were looking for, or some experience that you were looking for that you were missing in your life?
Well, there are a number of reasons that I worked with this particular coach, and he's got very well-developed feminine qualities, as well as, well, he's a man, but he's got very well-developed feminine qualities, and I really like that balance. And if I meet a female coach who has an equal balance one day, then, I might choose to work with her. I work with different coaches, not with the same one all the time, but I try and pick the one that intuitively feels like I will learn from the most.
Fantastic. So we touched upon the fear of feeling silly. Did you do something in your career that you felt, well, that was stupid and I might look silly, but then what did you do? How did you learn from that mistake?
Oh gosh, I've done so many, I can't think of one. Mistakes. Can you give me a category or an area?
You know what? Just go for it. This is the time that we have few viewers, but don't worry. This is not about exposing yourself. This is something that actually make you human, because we all make errors. And somehow we don't like to admit to that failure.
Oh, I'm happy to admit to my failures. I'm just not sure which one to pick. Let's see. I don't know if this is a mistake, but I remember when I was shifting to, when I was thinking of taking a break from my previous career or breaking with it and stepping into something different. And I wasn't quite sure yet what I was going to do. I just knew that I needed to take a step back and take some time. And I kind of trusted that something would emerge, but I wasn't sure what. And I don't know if it was a fear of visibility or if I didn't want to be judged by my colleagues and my peers. But I stopped, or I don't know if I ever started, but I remember not wanting to tell people what my dreams were, or what my aspirations were. I didn't want to share what I was doing. And so I remember at one point I was sort of saying that I'm going on maternity leave when people were asking me what I was doing next, because some people knew my that role was coming to an end. And I don't have children, and I was not pregnant, so I was nowhere near needing maternity leave. But I was saying that I was going on maternity leave. And I think I just wanted people to leave me alone and not interfere with my process. I didn't want people to discourage me. Maybe it was a mistake and that I should have just said what I wanted to do and not care. But I remember feeling quite vulnerable and fragile, and that it was quite tough to take that big leap, and that I didn't feel I could handle any criticism or input or discouraging input from anyone. So I just made up a story and said I'm going on maternity leave.
So you're still not on maternity leave. You don't have children, as far as I know.
No, technically I'm still on maternity leave, but never had any children or been pregnant.
Well, we've got lots of listeners who are mothers and who experience bias, and we actually talked about experiencing bias in tech, because you had a little play with STEM at one stage. You used to study maths, as far as I recall. And what do you think would be your advice for these women who would like to enter the field? Because, as I mentioned, this is a community of leaders and also community of people who would like to shift from users of technology into creators of technology. So what would be your advice for them? What to focus on and how to deal with bias?
Well, that's a big question. And just to clarify, so I haven't worked in STEM. I don't have professional experience in STEM. I did the maths baccalaureate when I was a teenager. So that was advanced maths and kind of university level maths, but at high school. And I was intent on becoming an engineer and doing electronics and codifying emotions. I mean, that was 25 years ago, so it was before the internet. And yeah, I think in a parallel universe, I would have been some kind of coder, or I don't know, some kind of software developer, I'm not sure. And I remember the guys were very confident, and the girls were less confident. And we tended to, and what was great is that we formed a little community. So the girls kind of rallied, and we sort of started working together to share, advice and tips and do homework together. But it did strike me that the guys sort of, they took it for granted that they were meant to be there and that they could do this. So what I would like to see for everyone, for women, but also for everyone who feels called to STEM or to work in that field of knowledge, is to find ways to really trust that you're meant to be there too, that you are exactly where you're meant to be, and work with the fears, the negative narrative, the limiting beliefs that come up from your past, from your upbringing, from your culture, that somehow get in the way. Yeah.
That's a very good advice. And I think if we apply Lady Macbeth's maxim, screw your courage to the sticking point and you shall not fail, is a great one to use at the moment. She wasn't involved in startups or technology, but she was definitely a woman of action. So I'm
not sure she's a role model necessarily, but I like her thinking on that particular point.
Well, at least she made it to the front cover. Isn't it what many women fail to do nowadays? Because if you look at the mainstream media, there is only few covers with business women or women in technology field, and somehow we never make it there. What do you think is the reason for that?
Well, I mean, I think there's a background reason that there are fewer women in the first place in these fields, and you know, like in many professions or industries that are still sort of heavily male dominated, by definition there are fewer women at the top as you go up the ladder. So I don't know, there are at least two ways. One is the long-term one, to keep having women claiming their roles, claiming the seat at the table. But also, you know, the internet offers so many opportunities to be more visible and to share a message and to be in the limelight. So that's more of a short-term approach, I guess. But that can work because it inspires, right? Like you said, you see a woman on the cover and it pings you. It feels like, wow, it's possible.
She wrote it. Yes.
Yeah.
And also, well, let me talk from my experience, because I deal with women on IT community, and I've been dealing with women in tech back in Poland and many other countries, because I was helping also establish international organization called Geek Girls Carrots.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of times I was told, well, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe, you know, ask me in a couple of years' time because I have not achieved anything. That is the biggest obstacle, I think, because we never want to brag about what we have achieved.
Yeah.
And how to tackle that?
Yeah.
As a transformational coach, are you also helping women to transform themselves and be visible and be out there? Because I think it's really not rocket science to get in front of people. And I remember you were telling me when we attended that conference, we were speaking on the same conference last year in London, and you told me that you were shivering at first time because you made people uncomfortable and you weren't sure how the audience will respond to that. And still, but it was worth it, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and well, my coach says it's not bragging if you've done it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bragging if you've done it. But women feel as though they're bragging when they talk about their strengths and their accomplishments, or they can. There are women who find it quite easy, or they've trained themselves to be able to do it. But culturally, in many cultures, I'm not saying all cultures, it's not acceptable for women to be in the forefront, in the limelight like that. So these are just cultural assumptions, they're cultural narratives that we have to work through, while hoping that the system also changes, and the system changes as we change, and we change as the system changes. It's not linear, it's a co-emergent type of process, so it's kind of messy. And it's not that it's one or the other, it really is co-emergent. But within our control is to work on our narratives and our limiting beliefs, and to remember that it's not bragging if you've done it. And I would really, to answer the question about what I would recommend or invite the community of amazing women that you work with, is to learn to articulate your strengths and your skills. That's one of the mistakes. I'm just thinking back now to one of the mistakes I made, especially when I shifted into entrepreneurship and just creating my own offer and my own service, is that I didn't spend enough time acknowledging and unpacking my own experience and skills and gifts. And I'm only starting to do that now, 4 years down the line. It's part of, it's just part of those, the way we've been trained as women to behave or to show up. So really spending some time articulating your strengths and your gifts and your talents, unpacking them, which will make it easier then to talk about them.
Absolutely. I actually during my presentation, that was presentation about leadership, I quoted my favorite role model, Cindy Gallop, who said, the single most paralyzing dynamic in life and in business is fear of what other people will think. And my answer was, and I used a picture of my dog, which is a pug. I said, "Pug it," and I remember it went viral, and everybody was smiling because instead of the F word, we used "pug it" to really screw the courage into sticking point. And I think it's vitally important to really recognize that there is one thing in life that always will remain. If fear is temporary, right? And regret is forever. And if you talk to old people in old houses and old people's home, and if you ask them what would you like to do in your life, or they will always say, I regret that I have not done so many things. So why wasting time and thinking about and overthinking, because the fear is somehow building this problem into a much bigger problem. Instead, just pug it, right?
Yeah, that's a great phrase. I remember that one.
Yeah. So, moving to your own experience, what is your biggest fear, and how do you cope with that?
What's my biggest fear? I think it's fear of losing my freedom. And how I cope with that? Well, there's strategic aspects and mindset aspects. So strategically, I create a life that gives me the most freedom I can have. So being an entrepreneur, obviously, I'm my own boss. And that's a big shift from how I used to my previous career. So that's been the biggest difference, I think, in the past 4 years, of how I've worked with my fear of not having freedom. And interestingly, I read some statistics that the number one reason people shift into becoming business owners or entrepreneurs is that they're ready to become their own boss. That's the reason people give. And I definitely would resonate with that. I was ready to have more freedom in terms of my work and my purpose and my impact in the world. In terms of mindset, then it's getting out of the comfort zone. So, fear of freedom. Why am I afraid of losing my freedom? Or who is it, or what is it that makes me afraid of losing my freedom? And asking these questions and really digging deep into what's going on. So just to cut the long story short, it would be things like learning to appreciate the value of structure and learning to appreciate the value of discipline, which I'd kind of given myself a break from for the past 4 years because I've been so disciplined before and so conscientious. But now I'm learning to reappreciate discipline, and getting out of the comfort zone would be therefore to have more structure in my timetable and actually do the things I'm going to do when I say I'm going to do them, not say I can do it tomorrow because there's no boss to tell me off if I don't. Also, difficult relationships. Sometimes people can feel, certainly I feel that, I'm my own boss. I can choose who to work with. I can choose who I want to work with. And so learning to appreciate the value of those relationships, because we always learn from the fears, the difficulties. And the more we can free ourselves from fear, in my case, it's the fear of losing my freedom, the more real freedom we actually have.
Right. I'm going to swap because unfortunately I'm having a little problem with one of my devices. So one thing I see, we've got a stream of questions, so that's great to see. And I see that Fran, who joined us last time, is asking us a question. Let me read it aloud. It is fair to say, in your experience, that as women, we take on the protector role instinctively. And we tend to stay in unfulfilling situation career-wise much longer than necessary. And we feel in the court and pursuing direct, relevant, more fulfilling interest. Is that true?
Well, I think, Francine, I think you already have your own answer. I'm wondering, are you in that kind of situation right now and wanting to make a change? And I would absolutely 100% support you in cutting the cord in a wise way. You know, obviously, if you have responsibilities, you can't just go off and live in a forest and abandon your responsibilities. But if you're feeling drawn to that, I would 100% support you to do that. And I have a saying, which is, you may have heard the famous Susan Jeffers saying, and title of her book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. For people who have a rescuer tendency, I would say feel the guilt and do it anyway.
Yeah, great.
I don't know if that helped, Francina, but I wish you much courage and encourage you to follow your intuition.
That's very true, and I can certainly also talk from my experience, and it's much more difficult, I think, for us as mothers to remember that we also have career, and it's much better for us to be happy as mothers than be unhappy and raise your children.
Absolutely. The research supports that. Children want quality moments, not a lot of moments with an unhappy person.
The good thing is Fran is just saying that she's not in that position and she's enjoying amazing career, and I can testify to that.
Oh, good. Well, that's excellent. Then you can be a role model to others.
Oh, absolutely. She is already. So before we move on to another question, from our audience, you're more than welcome to participate in the discussion. Please stream your questions to us. I would like to ask you, because you've experienced a lot. I mean, you've been working in a hospital, and your experience made you somehow. How do you cope with all that pain?
The pain of working in hospitals, or what do you mean?
Yes, and dealing with people's insecurities, fears.
In my current work, then.
In your work overall.
So how do I deal with being exposed to other people's pain through empathy?
Yeah. The pain, and also how do you keep optimistic? That was my because you're an optimist, and we talked before, and every time you speak, you say, it's positive, everything is going to be okay, and I just wonder, how do you keep positive?
Yeah. So maybe just quickly speak to the kind of compassion fatigue that people who care are at risk of. It is a real phenomenon in that if you care too much and you don't care enough for yourself, your energy is going to drain. As a doctor, this isn't necessarily the right way to do things in the future, but certainly there was a level of detachment where you couldn't identify with your patients. You were sort of technically minded, and you thought technically about what the problem was, try to look at the patterns, diagnose, put in place a logical management plan, and then execute it. So that's pretty much how I dealt with things back then. But of course, the cost is as I was cut off from my emotions and couldn't really connect deeply on a human level. And if you're spending long hours doing just that, then you are going to feel, or I certainly felt, in the long term, I started to feel an effect and an impact. Today, it's different because in my work, I have to connect deeply with people so that I can understand them at a deeper level and help them to really get to the root cause of what they're really afraid of, and work on that deeper level. So I don't have the option of being detached. And I, as a coach, and any therapist, any person who works that way with people, will have to have their own way where they get to be cared for by another person, by their own coach or their own therapist or their own guide or mentor. I would say that being very self-aware helps me a lot. So continually working on my awareness of what's happening inside me, what fears are coming up, working on those fears, applying compassion, applying wisdom to work through situations you can't not do it. It's part of the job description, and yeah. So that takes up a lot of my time outside coaching. I have to then do my own processing.
Mm-hmm. We've got another question, and I think judging from the name, it's a male joining us, and let me just repeat. We also welcome men in our community. We need all the help that we can get, because female issues are not just our issues. That's the biggest problem that we are facing, and you men are also impacted by that. So the question from Patrick is, terrific discussion, lady. Thank you. Amina, you clearly already have work at home experience. How best can ladies or gents in lockdown best deal with stress of isolation and stay focused on their goals?
Yeah, that's a great question, Patrick. And I think there are two goals here which can be dealt with separately. One is the stress of isolation, and one is working on your goals. And at the moment, I really invite everyone, my clients, for example, to focus on self-care, because in a time of crisis, and we're in a time of crisis, as it were, there's a sense of threat, everything's disrupted. There's a lot to process for our mind and our body. So we have to increase whatever we do to care for ourselves, whatever we do to relax, whatever we do to bring joy. And if you can, it's an opportunity to self-reflect. Like, why is it that isolation stresses me? Do I need people, or is it because I need to expend my energy, or I need to be busy all the time, I need to be doing things all the time? I'm not saying that that's what's going on for you, or that's the direction to go for everyone, but there is an opportunity to really reflect on who we are, how we function, and what we want to change. But the number one priority for anything at this time is to find a way to be grounded and centered, because whatever ideas you get will be much higher in quality, and whatever action you take will be much more focused and productive. I hope that helps, Patrick.
I hope so too. And we've got another question. We've got stream of questions. Thank you so much. It's much better when we can join discussion with you and feel what really bothers you. And here is a fantastic one from Sally Jera, who's asking, my question: how do we deal with being more visible than looking back and realizing you have outgrown the work you previously created and no longer identify with it anymore? And that's a tricky one, because nobody was born a genius on the day one, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a zero-sum game where you can't really hide your past. We are visible online, we can't hide from our past, and we've seen so many politicians, for example, being
I didn't catch the end of your sentence, Beata, but I know Sally. Hi, Sally. Great to see you here. So I'm trying to interpret your question, but not too much. For example, things that you believed 2 or 3 years ago, you don't believe anymore, and almost feel embarrassed of who you were then. Well, Sally, I acknowledge your honesty and your authenticity. Feeling that little embarrassment and being okay with it is fantastic, because that means you can, close that chapter, take what's good from it, and reinvest it in going forward, and leave the rest. Say thank you very much and goodbye. And that's okay. If you're someone who's interested in growth, who wants to fulfill your potential, who wants to be a leader, who wants to be an entrepreneur, who's a creative mind, you are going to experience several creative cycles, not just one, university and then job and then family and then middle life and then death. You're going to experience many, 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 many more cycles. And so being agile, being flexible in your mind and in your emotions to handle the emotional cycles of change is what's going to really enable you to fly. And it's fine, if your previous career, what you realize that's not what I want to do next. I did. That's what I realized. And everybody said, well, not everybody, but many people felt that I was wasting my career. I was wasting my talent. I was wasting all my training. And what was I doing? That was scary. And my intuition told me to proceed. And that served me well. So don't be afraid. It's okay to say goodbye to the past.
And acknowledge that, right? Don't run away from the past. One thing that I have to tell you that really amazes me, the number of people who joined the talk with Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a great media expert and he's a huge influencer in America. And sometimes people who are calling him are just out of this world. There was an ex-prisoner, inmate, and they talk about, how difficult it is for them to reestablish themselves from what they've done in the past, hide their tattoos, hide their criminal life, but they want to change it. And people somehow believe in their change. So we want to believe in your honesty. We want to believe in your humanity. And if you pretend it didn't happen, it's not going to help you in the long run, because humanity always wins and truthfulness always wins. Well, I'm a firm believer. What about you, Amina?
So can you repeat the question? That humanity always wins?
I believe the truth wins. It's much more sustainable to be truthful than hide from the past.
Yes, absolutely. And coming back to your question about optimism and how am I optimistic, I would say optimism is a choice that we just have to keep making. The way we see the world, our model of the world, is the lens through which we see things, and that guides our actions. So make sure you have a good model. Make sure you have a positive model that allows you to create or contribute positively to the world.
Oh, absolutely. That's why we are called PhD, Positivity.
Exactly. And yeah.
So now we are climbing to wrapping up questions. I know that you prepared some graphics for us, but before you show it to us, I would like to ask you, let's imagine tomorrow lockdown is over. You're allowed to have a private breakfast with anybody in the world and anywhere in the world. Doesn't have to be breakfast at Tiffany's. So who would it be and where would you go for that private breakfast?
Well, it's either the Prime Minister of New Zealand or the Prime Minister of Iceland, who are both women. I would love to spend some time with them. They seem to be doing fantastic work, and I would love to spend some time just gaining insights from them.
Good. And where would you invite them?
Oh, I'd love to go either to see the Northern Lights.
Invite them anywhere.
Yeah. Where would I invite them? I think on a beach. We could go and just have a nice picnic breakfast on a beach. That sun at dawn.
I'll tell you something. Malta has got lovely beaches. I'm speaking from Malta. I'm speaking from my own experience. So I hope you can make it one day.
Well, you're welcome to join us.
Fantastic. With pleasure.
That would be great. Well, you know, my first reply was I'd like to have breakfast with you, but you said it had to be someone else. So.
Oh, there you go. Sally is thanking us for incredible insights.
Hi, Sally. You're amazing. Remember that.
I hope we can invite Sally one day to our show. Maybe she can share her experience from the other side of the table. Amina, how about that?
Great. She's an entrepreneur and a doctor.
Excellent. We love entrepreneurial spirit all around us. And before we wrap up and we talk about how to deal with fear, and we are all vulnerable, and somehow we just need to make sure we peg it, I just wanted to ask you a question about optimism, because you touched upon the fact that you're an optimist and you deal with fear, and I just wanted to ask you, is there a way to make yourself more optimistic about the future, especially now when we are overwhelmed with so much negativity and fake news is everywhere? Is there a way to make sure that you're keeping positive and live the way PhD is? Positivity hack is delivered.
So the phrase from Mr. Rogers was a series that I never watched, but I know the phrase comes to mind, which is look for the helpers in any situation and also be one. So in any situation, no matter how bad, see if you can notice someone who's helping and connect with them mentally. And then how might you be able to help? But I want to also come back to the point about self-care and caring for yourself first. It's difficult to be positive or optimistic if you're not looking after yourself. And there are simple things like just self-talk that's soothing. So soothing self-talk has been shown to reduce our negative thoughts and our inner criticism. And similar things like loving kindness meditation, just a few minutes of that a day can really change your vibe and how you feel and how you see the world. So take care of yourselves and give yourself a big dose of kindness and compassion first.
Great. That's a great piece of advice. Amina, thank you so much. Before we finish, we are still open to questions if there are any questions. I spoke to Vicky, who was sharing some excellent books on how to deal with fear. Do you know some books that really help to tackle that challenge and you could recommend to our viewers today or listeners?
There are so many. I love the work of Byron Katie because she just zooms in straight in on your fears and your fear narratives. And that's work that I use myself and I use with my clients. She has plenty of material on YouTube, on her website. So I think if you check out the work of Byron Katie, you'll have some tools to start working with fears immediately, and you'll be surprised by the results. Does that help? There's also a sheet on my website that's similar. I'm happy to share it in a link if you like, so you can share it with your audience.
Right. Yep, absolutely. I will be happy to share it later on. Thank you so much, Amina. I just wanted to make sure that everybody's safe and a little bit less fearless and more courageous. Because it's really every day is about making a decision, and small steps lead to big achievements. And if you don't make that decision, the fear will not disappear. And so I hope we managed to share some advice you can take from us. And Amina is available for your face-to-face meetings. You also have got your YouTube channel. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to offer 3 complimentary conversations, just on a first-come, first-served basis. If anybody wants to have a coaching conversation, just to explore a little bit what's going on for you, how what you can do in the immediate term, and if you're interested in longer-term coaching, we can talk about that. But you're welcome. Happy to offer 3 conversations, and just in the spirit of giving and supporting everybody in the time of crisis.
And that actually was my next question. We are joined by Nasli, who's also a coach, and I think she's going to take up on your offer. Mm-hmm. That's my final question. So I know that you're working on some projects, and how is it going to improve the lives of communities or people who are now suffering great depression?
Yeah, well, hopefully it won't be a Great Depression. Hopefully we'll find ways to, the UK's made great efforts in trying to prop the economy and support the people, right? Not just businesses. So right now, a lot of my clients are doctors or at the front line. So I'm supporting that way by supporting them. There's a leader circle I hold monthly that I'm transferring online. So hopefully it'll be more accessible. And then I'm looking to develop a special form of coaching or coaching program called Slow Down, to speed up, to help people just really ground and combat that stress and be able to reconnect with their intuition and find their feet and see what's coming next for them.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to your success, and I want you to succeed, and I hope that there is going to be more women who are going to hack the future and be positive and pack it.
Thank you, Rata. That's a fantastic sentence. Yeah, thank you for your positivity and for your efforts and for your passion and supporting women all around the world and men.
Thank you so much. I look forward to our next session, Wednesday, 6 o'clock. And thank you very much for your question and valuable support. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.